Panic buying is wrong. You don't need all the pasta and toilet roll in the world, other people need some too. Stay indoors, shop as you normally would when you go to the supermarkets, and don't be a Doyle. Panic buying isn't a new thing though, it's been happening in football for years and years. And while today panic buying is very bad, don't do it, the current 20 Premier League teams have had varying degrees of success with panic buys, but on the whole, it's been bad. And before we start, some of these deals are free transfers and loans, but there are still some money exchanged to accounts, okay? Arsenal Mikel Arteta. In August 2011, Arsenal sold Cesc Fabregas to Barcelona, but replacing him wasn't easy. 2 weeks after the skipper left, Arsenal was still no closer to a new centre midfielder to fill the hole Fabregas left. Come transfer deadline day, and in a panic, the Gunners looked to Merseyside and brought in Mikel Arteta from Everton, paying £10 million for his services. On the face of it, it looked like the Gunners had just found another Spanish midfielder who was a little bit cheaper in hope that no one would notice. But he ended up being much more than that, enjoying a few good years at the Emirates before retiring, even if he never matched Fabregas' quality. Obviously Arteta made a big enough impression, otherwise he probably wouldn't be manager right now. Aston Villa Borja Baston. A transfer from the most recent window, there's no way Aston Villa would have signed Borja Baston if Wesley hadn't got injured. But when the record signing was ruled out for the season, Villa needed strikers desperately. Samata arrived and looked decent, but even he needed backup, which is what led to Baston's return to the Premier League. He'd flopped there previously with Swansea, unable to justify his £15 million price tag. Baston arrived 9 minutes before the transfer window closed, but with everything going on, this panic buy might not matter. Bournemouth Glen. Okay, this one wasn't too big a panic, but just work with me. The Cherries were finally a Premier League club in the summer of 2015 and wanted a bit of Premier League experience to lead the line. Late in the day, Murray would arrive for £4 million from Crystal Palace on transfer deadline day, signing a 3-year deal. But he only lasts one of those years. He scored 3 league goals for Bournemouth before joining Brighton, where obviously he's had a lot more success, arguably the best spell of his career. Brighton Leonardo. Sometimes you re-sign a player praying he'll relive his past glories, and I think that's what happened with Leonardo in 2018. The striker returned at the Amex in January 2018 on loan from Leicester, and he returned as a Premier League winner. The Seagulls needed some extra firepower at the top of the pitch, but it's fair to say Ulloa didn't provide it. He scored just 1 league goal during his spell before returning to Leicester, with Brighton deciding against making the deal permanent. Burnley Peter Crouch. 5 teams in and you notice that a lot of panic buys are strikers. Crouch is a Premier League veteran, but when he returned in the top flight in 2019, it certainly raised some eyebrows. On January deadline day, Stoke wanted to sign Sam Vokes from the Clarets, but Sean Dyche didn't want to leave himself light in the striker department. So Burnley proposed a player plus cash deal that would see Crouch move to Turf Moor as part of the deal, meaning the big man had another chance at the top deep into his late 30s. He wouldn't score a single goal and retired at the end of the season. Chelsea Mateo Kovacic. This was a panic buy with a twist, as it came nowhere near a deadline day. But with Chelsea under a transfer ban, as well as bringing in a new manager and losing best player Eden Hazard, they were slightly up against it. Lampard couldn't bring in anyone but Mateo Kovacic. The midfielder had been on loan the previous year, and since he was already registered with the club, he could be signed permanently. Would they have signed him if there'd been no ban? I don't think so, but Kovacic has proven his worth, performing a lot better this season following his £40 million move from Real Madrid. Crystal Palace Batshuayi. Back to the strikers, and goals have plagued Crystal Palace ever since Christian Benteke forgot how to operate as a footballer. And having seen him fail on loan at Valencia, Palace took a punt on Batshuayi as they looked to distance themselves from the relegation zone, no doubt paying a decent fee for the loan as well as a portion of his wages. Did it work? I'd say so. Palace stayed up, with Batshuayi scoring 5 goals in 11 Premier League appearances, which is a decent return really. Everton Iwobi. I mean, what were Everton even thinking on deadline day last summer? They'd failed in a bid to sign Wilfried Zaha, but why did they spunk a load of cash on Iwobi of all players? Were they desperate for a winger, really? The Nigerian international cost Everton an initial £28 million, an extortionate fee for a player who in the grand scheme of things is pretty average. And that's all he's proved to be at Goodison Park so far, epitomising their recruitment since they got Farhad Moshiri's money. Poor bloke must be thinking, why do they keep wasting his fortune? Leicester City Slimani. After Leicester won the title, they kind of panicked. Signing players suddenly became a lot tougher, as they needed people who were good enough to continue the momentum and compete in the Champions League. And they also needed big names to match their newfound stardom. Enter Slimani. The Algerian had been a machine for Sporting, but was never a good fit for Leicester, seemingly just arriving because of his name and reputation. He's technically still a Leicester player as well, now on his third loan spell away from the King Power. Liverpool, Andy Carroll. Who else was it going to be? Liverpool splashed out £35 million on Andy Carroll on January 31st, 2011, completing the deal just before the window shut. But why were they so desperate to sign a striker who didn't fit their style of play whatsoever? Well, Fernando Torres was on his way to Chelsea for £50 million and the Reds needed a new number 9. It was a disaster at Anfield for Carroll, but that deadline day wasn't all bad. At least Luis Suarez proved he could fill the void left by Torres and make up for Carroll's shortcomings as well. Manchester City, Claudio Bravo. When Pep Guardiola arrived at Man City, goalkeeping was no longer just about saving shots. It was about playing out from the back, composure in possession and starting attacks from deep. And as the transfer window began to wind down, it became clear that Pep needed someone else rather than Caballero and Joe Hart. In a panic, Claudio Bravo arrived, but he ended up doing more bad than good. He was so poor, City had to invest even more money the following summer, with Edison finally providing the solution to their problems. Manchester United, Odion Ighalo. A recent signing and a man that epitomised the panic buy. Manchester United were desperate for a striker in January, being linked with every name under the sun. And on deadline day their prayers were answered, kind of. Odion Ighalo would ride from Shanghai Greenland Shenhua on loan to a sea of laughter from everyone who wasn't a Man United fan. Oh, how the mighty had fallen, we all said. But to be fair to Ighalo, he's done alright, netting a few goals in the cups to quieten some of the doubters. Newcastle United, Shefki Kuqi. Remember when Liverpool panic bought Andy Carroll? Well, that had a knock-on effect as it forced Newcastle to panic buy as well. They ended up bringing in free agent Shefki Kuqi, which at least wasn't an expensive panic buy. But for reference, they replaced a future star and £35 million Andy Carroll with a free agent striker who hadn't played in the top flight for years. Kuqi didn't score a single goal for the Magpies and joined League One Oldham after he left, which says it all really. Norwich City, Yannick Wildschut. On January 31st, 2017, Norwich splashed out in hope of giving them a lift in the race for promotion. Spoiler alert, it didn't. They spent £7 million on Dutch winger Yannick Wildschut, who had impressed for Wigan, but mainly in League One. It was a large amount of money for a player who didn't really deliver what they wanted, and after missing out on promotion, Wildschut left 1 year after arriving. Sheffield United, Ollie McBurnie. This one was a stretch, but we needed to pick someone. The Blades needed firepower ahead of their return to the Premier League and decided to spend £20 million on a striker who had one good season in the Championship. McBurnie netted 22 goals for Swansea last season, but was £20 million really worth it? Or did the Blades panic into spending big money on a striker they desperately needed? Southampton, Shane Long. I don't know if this was a panic buy, but for the price they paid I hope it was. Shane Long's had a long Premier League career and I don't really understand how. He scored 10 goals in a top flight season only once. I know he works hard, but really that's about it. But in 2015, on the back of 4 goals for Hull City, wow, Southampton spent £12 million on the Irish forward. I mean, that's all levels of wrong. They must have been panicked into buying a striker, it's the only explanation. Tottenham, Moussa Sissoko. Following relegation, Moussa Sissoko desperately wanted out of Newcastle, but he had to wait until transfer deadline day 2016 to get his wish. Tottenham came to his rescue, paying a ridiculous £30 million for a player that didn't even look like they needed. Sissoko wasn't technically sound, so didn't even look like a Pochettino player, and it reflected in his first season, where he was woeful for Spurs. Fortunately for both parties, Sissoko came good, meaning they somehow got away with what at the time looked like one of the worst panic buys in Premier League history. Watford, Ismaila Sarr. A signing from last summer and the most expensive man in Watford's history, I think this kind of has to go down as a panic buy. Earlier in the window, Watford had a bid rejected for Sarr and looked like it wouldn't stump up the money Wren wanted. But come deadline day and with Watford desperately needing some extra attacking power, they bit the bullet and paid the £40 million required. A lot of money for a club like Watford, but fortunately he's proven he will be a Premier League star in years to come, and he was the man responsible for ending Liverpool's invincible dreams as well. West Ham United, Jarrod Bowen. Another recent transfer, and one I think will pay off in the long run. Jarrod Bowen was a man in demand in January, but West Ham didn't seem to enter the race until late in the day. But on deadline day in January, the Hammers gave Hull City an initial £18 million to sign the forward. West Ham were desperate, they were sliding towards the Championship and relegation could mean oblivion for them as a club. Will this sizable investment keep them up? They bloody well hope so. And finally Wolves, Ivan Caballero. Our final panic buy and one with a twist, and also one that isn't really too big of a panic. But in July 2016, Wolves were taken over by Fosun International. That meant they had money to spend, but not a lot of time to spend it. And on deadline day that summer, Wolves broke their transfer record thanks to George Mendes, who brokered a deal to bring Monaco winger Ivan Cavallero to Molineux for £7 million. It worked out as he helped to guide them to promotion in his second season alongside all his Portuguese mates, but the Premier League proved to be a step too far, which is why he's now a Fulham player. So that's one panic buy by every Premier League club. Let us know what you reckon in the comments below. Thanks for watching and don't forget to like, share and subscribe.